Zanib Mian initially studied and then taught science before making the decision to create change within children's publishing, where she felt that diverse characters from all minorities and backgrounds weren't being fully represented in books for young children. She launched Sweet Apple Publishers with a clear commitment to publishing inclusive books, many of which she's authored herself. She regularly features in the Bradford Literature Festival, was commissioned to write an opera for the Mahogany Opera Group, and is also on the panel of judges for the prestigious Young Muslim Writers Awards. Her debut title, The Muslims, won the Little Rebels Award in 2017, and this has now been republished as Planet Omar Accidental Trouble Magnet, the first in a 3-part series. Zanib recently met with Nikki Gamble to talk about her work and plans for the future.
So, this morning I'm very excited to welcome Zanib Mian to the Reading Corner, and I've been hoping to talk to you for some time because I absolutely loved the book The Muslims when it was out, and then of course it disappeared for a little while and has re-emerged as Planet Omar, and it's got a subtitle, Accidental Trouble Magnet. And we're going to talk a little bit about that book today, but I'd like to start really by knowing a little bit more about you and how you came to be writing children's books.
I was always writing when I was a little girl. I loved writing, and then when I went to secondary school I just fell into the world of science and I absolutely loved it and pursued that, and just my writing was just set aside. I didn't even continue with my stories and poems the way I used to when I was in primary school. But when I had my own children, I realised that there weren't any fun stories which weren't issue books that just represented everybody, or had characters, main characters, or even at that time side characters that were from an ethnic minority background, like my own children. And that's when I just wanted to make up my own stories again to tell to them, something that they would really relate to and laugh at. And so that's how I got back into writing for children.
Right, and how was it originally picked up then, the book? Because it had a previous life. What happened there?
The Muslims did have a previous life because I published it under my own small publishing house, under which I had previously published many picture books, diverse picture books. So it was published under Sweet Apple, but it didn't gain the spotlight until it won the Little Rebels Award in the summer of 2018. And that did tremendous things for it. It threw it into the spotlight, and so therefore it was picked up by Hachette and a much wider audience, which is what I had hoped for it when I was writing it.
Fantastic. And that's such a great award, the Little Rebels, isn't it? We like that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the book.
So Planet Omar is narrated by a young boy called Omar, and he's thrown into a new life because of a new school, a new home, and he becomes the subject of the class bully's attention, and he just navigates it in such a hilarious way with his huge imagination and his wit and his charm. And there's lots of funny things going on. They get lost on the London Underground, there's a zombie chase, there's a dragon.
I know, it's rip-roaring fun and serious too, and perhaps we'll come to that in a little while. When the book was taken up by Hachette, were there many changes that were made?
Actually, it's all of the content that's in The Muslims is there, but it's been expanded. So there's lots more funny bits, there's a few extra chapters, and there's more on Charlie, the relationship with Charlie. He's brought in back at the end again a bit more on Daniel and the family. There's a whole chapter on the Science Sunday, which was just mentioned in The Muslims, but there wasn't, an insight into how it actually happens. So there's lots of expanded bits, and obviously the illustrations. Yes. It just looks so different, and it looks amazing, great, because for The Muslims I illustrated it.
Right.
Because it was supposed to look like an 8-year-old drew it, which was perfectly fine by me.
Yeah, fantastic. And as you say, the world is a little bit more developed in this iteration of the book, and I suspect that sets it up very nicely for future developments as well.
Yes.
Maybe we'll come on to that in a little while too. I wanted to ask you whether you talked about your own children, and I wanted to ask you whether you had in mind an implied reader for this. I have a reason for asking, but I'm interested to know your thoughts.
Well, I think What I had in mind was I was quite greedy with my readership because I wanted not only young Muslim children to read it and see themselves in it, but I want every child to read it, because if you're Muslim, it's great because there's so much in there that you will think, oh, my family does that, and you'll laugh at it, and you'll feel that, wow, I'm in a book. But on the other hand, it's really, really important for lots of children from all backgrounds to read it, and especially if they haven't got any Muslim friends or neighbours or something. So the readership goes wide.
Yeah. And the reason that I asked, I didn't want to feed you an answer particularly, but the reason that I asked is because obviously there's the Reflecting Realities research, which I'm sure you've been involved in, which shows how few books there are for children of minority groups to see themselves within. But it's written in such a way that there are things that are explained within the book that you wouldn't need to explain to a child who is from that community. So I suspected you were wanting to open people's eyes a little bit as well.
I believe that any prejudice and stereotypes can be overcome by just a little bit of education. So there is a lot in there about Ramadan, and people might just think, that's crazy, why would people starve themselves for a whole day? It's difficult, I couldn't do it. So just giving a little bit of background that, this is what we believe and that's why we do it, I think it helps and it opens up eyes. And even for Muslim children who have heard it before, I find with my children I need to reiterate these things every year. It kind of like a refresher course.
Yeah.
They often learn it at a mosque or from their parents, who might not know how to explain it in a very fun way.
Yeah.
Not undermining parents or anything, but I think it's great for them to see it from the perspective of a 9-year-old boy telling it in his own fun and humorous way.
And there are lots of, there is a dig, I don't mind saying this on a podcast, there's a dig at the Daily Mail there. And the perceptions that people have that are fed through press. The fact that people don't have the shower with their hijab on, for instance, and that's really for an external audience, isn't it, as well, or a wider audience, I should say.
Yeah, I wanted to put things in there which people might have always wanted to know, but were too polite to ask.
Yeah.
So I thought, let's answer some of those questions. No, we don't wear the hijab full time in the house. We literally have to run around and find one and throw it on before we open the door.
One of the strengths of the book, I think, is that it is both specific, but it's incredibly universal. So people will have, no doubt, have said already that this is going to hugely appeal to children that enjoy Wimpy Kid, to children that enjoy Tom Gates, because there's so much universality in there.
I do hear that a lot. I think it's just because Omar is such the boy next door. Any child, no matter what their background is, will be able to relate to him and find him hilarious and look up to him or learn from him and just want to follow his amazing story.
As well as the humour, and it is funny. I laughed. It is funny. But as well as the humour, it's a book that is infused with real kindness, actually.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit, is that important to you?
That's very important to me, especially when it came to dealing with those heavier elements in the book. Racism. I didn't want to throw another group of people under the bus, so I wanted everybody to come together at the end. And that's just very much me. I'm a very peace-loving, hippie kind of kindness love. Smiling at random people. So, that's always the message that I want to put across in my stories. Kindness.
So let's talk a little bit then to exemplify that. Let's talk about the neighbour, Mrs. Rogers.
Yeah.
She starts out as an all-out baddie, really. She's pretty mean. Yeah,
she is. But it's nice because as we follow the story, we see her completely turn around, and it's like you mentioned, it's just a bit of kindness that won her over, and perhaps a bit of education, just letting people into your world and so that they can understand you better, because the fear always comes from not understanding.
I'm surprised at or not surprised really, but I observe how often it's food that can bring people together. And actually there's quite a bit of food in here in spite of the fasting.
Yeah, somehow we talk lots more about food when it's Ramadan. Food. I think food is a great way to bring people together. You're sharing part of if you're sharing your cultural food, you're sharing that. It sends a message that, we care.
You do deal with some quite serious issues too. Can you tell us a little bit about those? What are we dealing with here?
The reason why I chose to write a middle grade book was because I heard of the surge in faith-based bullying in schools, and after Trump's campaign took off, how politically aware children were in schools, and sometimes in the wrong manner. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to overcome the sort of racism and bigotry and negative stereotypes that were out there of Muslims. So those are the heavier elements in the book, which I've tried to put across in a light-hearted way, could challenge that.
So in that case, I'm quite interested in the change of title from the Muslims to Planet Omar.
Yeah.
Why is that change?
I love the title of the Muslims because it really plays on what people who do come from that sort of mindset might refer to us as, the Muslims, and then it turns around to be a good thing at the end, where Mrs. Rogers refers to the Muslims with a positive connotation instead. But Planet Omar is, I guess it's more sort of universal, it's more friendly, people are more likely to pick it up. I heard from a few people that they thought the Muslims was, get this, non-fiction book about Muslims.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we wanted to avoid all confusion there.
Yeah.
It's a fun title for all kids to be able to...
It is.
Yeah.
It is. The other thing that I was quite interested in is that because of the daily life, there are quite a lot of mentions of religion in there. And I was talking to another writer of a different faith who was saying how difficult it was to have a book written that had a religious element to it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a view on that.
When I was writing it, I was very carefully trying to balance not putting too much in there, but putting just enough to educate. And obviously, if you expand on things too much, it's going to make it boring for a person who's not of that faith. But if I set out to overcome stereotypes and prejudice by educating, there had to be at least something in there. And why not? No other books have it, so...
Yeah. It just struck me as this other writer was talking that possibly that is, without us realising in a way, it has been an area of censorship. Maybe not even explicitly so. It might be an implicit.
Because we're always told don't talk about religion, politics. But I think it helped me as well feel more comfortable in my own skin because, Omar comes across as somebody who's very... he's himself, he's not afraid to be himself, and so he does say these things openly to his friends that we're fasting and this is why. And I think that's great. It's a great place to be within yourself, to be comfortable in your own skin and to be able to explain something about yourself and your faith. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the other characters, just so that we get a flavour. So Omar is great, but his family's fantastic too.
Thank you. Yeah, they're great fun. Loosely based on my own family, perhaps.
Are you his mother?
Yeah, perhaps. Loosely based. Well, I am a scientist as well. My brother's a scientist. I really wanted to inspire kids with science as well. And just their antics. Yeah, it's very much inspired by the Mian family. Lots of things that happen in there. I've had a giggle with my editor when we've been editing it, and she said, I love this bit, and I'd say, that actually happened.
So do you have Science Sundays?
No. I wish.
Tell the listeners about Science Sundays. They're fun.
Science Sundays. I've done things like that with my children in past, but it's not been a weekly thing.
Right.
But I thought if both parents were scientists, that would likely be something that they'd want to do. So Science Sundays is a day that they spend with the family, not the whole day, but a couple of hours a day on that day, experimenting, doing fun explosions and making slime or anything that's fun and scientific with their kids.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that Planet Omar is going to be a series. So are we working on any others at the moment?
Yes, it's going to be a series. The second book in the series has already been submitted to my editor. So I had great fun writing the second one as well. And then we'll look forward to a third one and hopefully after that more.
Fantastic. Are you able to give us a little glimmer of what adventure Omar might be getting up to?
In the second book, Omar goes through a bit of he puts an entrepreneur hat on because he's trying to raise money to save his mosque. And obviously Charlie and Daniel are right with him there, so there's lots of fun to be had.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Zainab, thank you so much for coming and giving us an insight into the world of Omar today.
Thank you.
It's such a delight to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to In the Reading Corner with Just Imagine. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you can find many more on the podcast section of our website, justimagine.co.uk, plus via iTunes or your usual podcast provider. Don't forget to pass the pod and recommend this fantastic free resource to your friends and colleagues. Just Imagine also has a free fortnightly newsletter packed full of the latest news, CPD training, reviews and giveaways. To sign up, visit justimagine.co.uk/newsletter.